This is The Space Shot, episode 197 for November 27th, 2017. Mars 2 and the Q and the Gray. Hey everyone, welcome to The Space Shot, your daily space history, pop culture, and news fix. I'm John Mulnix. Mars 2 was one of the twin probes launched by the Soviet Union during the 1971 launch window between Earth and Mars. These spacecraft were launched just weeks apart and were on their way to Mars exceptionally quickly thanks to a fortuitous planetary alignment. The Mars 2 spacecraft had an unusually smooth flight to Mars, with exacting mid-course corrections that put the spacecraft right where it needed to be. The final maneuver for the Mars 2 lander took place on November 27, 1971. Sadly and ironically, the spacecraft was too precise in its mid-course corrections, so during the entry phase of the flight, the spacecraft's computer was pre-programmed to assume an incorrect trajectory, so the final maneuvers ended up sending Mars 2 on too steep of an entry into the Martian atmosphere. During this steep entry, its parachute never deployed, which resulted in the Mars 2 spacecraft becoming the first object created by humans to impact the surface of Mars. The Mars 2 orbiter was successfully inserted into an orbit around the red planet, and it went on to study the Martian surface until March of 1972. I've got one piece of science history for today. On November 27, 1701, Anders Celsius was born in Sweden. He was a professor of astronomy as well as a mathematician and physicist. He contributed to important studies of aurora and Earth's magnetic field, as well as other astronomical observations. He's most well known for his proposal of the Celsius temperature scale, which is named after him. Funny enough, the scale was originally backward, with the freezing point for water at 100 degrees and the boiling point at 0. I do have one piece of pop culture history for today. The Star Trek Voyager episode The Q and the Gray aired on this day in 1996. I enjoy any episode with Q, so naturally I had to talk about The Q and the Gray today. In this episode, a civil war is brewing amongst the Q continuum, so Q, the Q played by John Delancey, proposes something unexpected to Captain Janeway.
I know that you're probably asking yourself, why would a brilliant, handsome, dashingly omnipotent being like Q want to mate with a scrawny little bipedal specimen like me?
Let me guess. No one else in the universe will have you.
Nonsense. I could have chosen a Klingon Targ, the Romulan Empress, a Cyrillian microbe.
Really? I beat out a single-celled organism. How flattering.
It's an overwhelming honor, isn't it? I can't get you out of my mind. You are confident, passionate, beautiful.
And totally uninterested.
Kathy, you can't leave. My cosmic clock is ticking.
Janeway doesn't go along with Q's plan, but ends up getting caught in the events that Q set in motion. It's difficult to talk about an individual Q, since all Q call each other Q, and Q can denote any individual in the Q continuum, or the Q continuum itself. A little confusing, I know. It's an interesting episode that's worth checking out, even if you haven't seen any other episodes of Star Trek Voyager, so I'll link to it in the show notes.
I'd say a civil war is pretty dire, wouldn't you?
His death caused this conflict.
It caused chaos and upheaval. Because even though he was gone, his calls for freedom and individualism continued to echo in the ears of those who believed in his teachings, myself among them. I sounded the trumpet and carried the banner. Naturally, others followed. The forces of the status quo tried to crush us once and for all, but we fought back. And now there's a cosmic struggle for supremacy.
Since you're here, why don't you let me know what you think of the podcast by leaving a review on iTunes. It takes just a minute to do that, and it makes a huge difference because it helps even more people find the show. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any of the daily episodes. As always, the show notes have more information on today's episode. You can hit me up on Instagram and Twitter. Find me at John Molnix. I'm always up to chat. You can also connect with me on Facebook. Just search The Space Shot or click the link in the show notes. Tomorrow, Space Lab 1. I'm John Molnix, and I'll catch you on the flip side.